opportunity. And thank you, sir,
My pleasure.
for coming down to Raipur all the way and being here and promoting and encouraging entrepreneurs here. So, just to start with, like in my last 1 year of interacting with the entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and early stage entrepreneurs here, I have learned that the biggest hurdle that they face in the initial stages is like being present in Raipur. A lot of people say, I ask a lot of people, what's the biggest challenge? They say Raipur. I say why? They say we're not getting any customers for our products or services. Like we have heard about how to start up. So these guys are guys who have started up. It's been 6 months to 1 year they've started up. Now, when they want to go to the next stage, they're finding that difficulty. So just like.
So thanks, Alpha Pranav, and thank you very much for having me. I think it's whatever we've heard since morning, and it's pretty much a summation of whatever we heard. Because what Amit was saying and what the gentleman before me also mentioned, I think the basics of the game don't change, right? I mean, in my view, and I may have some radical views, and pardon me for that, people at times treat the whole startup ecosystem as a separate world altogether, detached from what a business is or a commercial venture is. Fundamentally, a startup is also a commercial venture. It's like any other business, and the truth of any business is that you exist for numbers, you exist for revenues, as Amit was also mentioning in the morning, and a bottom line, right? So I think you need to keep continuing to focus on delivering a top line and working towards creating a bottom line. So you need to really treat it like any other business. So the rules of the game remain the same. You may have a great idea, you have a great product, but till the time you don't focus on driving revenues, I think that's what becomes a impediment for growth. So I think as I was telling you a while back, I was thinking about this acronym. I think to basically scale up, you need to be mad. M as in mindset, you have to have the attitude, and you need to actually have a doer network. Basically, when you started out, you built a business and you need to scale up. What is very important is the next 20, 30 people that you hire in your business. Next 20, 30 people who are associated with your business idea. So I call it the doer network. It could be your own team, it could be your ecosystem of partners, or people who are collaborating around your business model. So I think it's very important. See, because funding is important. Finance is obviously a great, a big ingredient for business scale up. But it is not the only thing. And people cannot be just chasing valuations. You have to do things right, and you have to make the right choices. So whenever you're starting up and whenever you're scaling up, I think it's very important that you actually build a business keeping in mind the long haul. I mean, when our fathers and our grandfathers and people, over the last 50, 60 years have started up, so to say, in the sort of more conventional term, or have become entrepreneurs, they have not really looked at cashing out, or they have not really looked at valuation. They've been outcomes, right? So I think that is what my submission would be to the audience, that look at these things as outcomes, do the right things, make the right moves, take the right steps, get the right people involved, and more importantly, have the right mindset and attitude, and outcomes will be positive.
So considering your proficiency in brand building and marketing, just wanted to throw some light on how do you influence the first set of consumers so that those first set of consumers actually use the product and go ahead and talk about that. How do you do that? Because initially, if the product is new, and mostly when we think of startups, it has an element of innovation involved. So how do you actually go ahead and influence the potential users?
See, I think overall, from a broad context, I think if you're an entrepreneur and you're starting up, I think the most important brand is brand you, because that is something which always stays, and that is what you're representing at the end of the day. As somebody was mentioning, I think it was Amit or somebody else, that fundamentally all selling, right? What are you selling? You're selling your brand. You're selling your thinking, you're selling your thought process. So I think that is very important. That is core to everything that you do. Coming to your question or your specific point about influencing customers or users of your product, I think it's very important to think like a consumer, right? It's very important to also, use the product like a consumer would do. Step yourself in the consumer's shoes. Let's take Uber as an example. I don't know, it's a very common example and people really know it, but people can relate to it. Uber thinks and thought that it's a product company, it's a tech company, but it's not. It's a service company, right? So you have to think that what are the 3 or 4 things which the consumer or the passenger wants. They want convenience, they want safety, security and hygiene, right? I want my car to be clean, drivers to be well behaved, I should be safe and secure when I'm moving from point A to B, and it should be convenient. So it's a product, it's a tech platform, right? But the wrap are these 4 things which is the value given to the consumer, right? So you have to constantly focus on creating that value, and more importantly, you have to actually go out there and meet customers. Because I think what people tend to do as, entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial businesses and even other businesses become big, you tend to get detached from the marketplace. You tend to stop meeting customers. I mean, from my example, because I'm in financial services now for the last 11 years, but before that I was in FMCG, durables, lifestyle, retail. I think one thing that I've always consistently done is go out there in the market and meet customers. So to keep meeting customers, don't stay detached from reality. I think that is the biggest mistake people do, right? Understand what the people really want and be in touch with your customers. That's very important, irrespective of what business you're in. You may be in the durables business, you may have, in the digital business or any other business. Be in touch with reality, be in touch with your customers and be out there. And if you feel that there is a change which is required, quickly pivot. That's very important. And if there's a mistake, correct it and move on,
So that means the marketing part of it starts directly right from the product. When the product is developed, it starts then and then, understanding the needs.
No, absolutely. I mean, it actually starts from assessing the consumer needs, what the customer wants, and it basically is twofold. In certain cases, you know what the customer wants, right? When you're talking to people, when you're going out there, and you're doing sort of outside-in thinking, so to say. But a lot of it in certain categories is also inside-out thinking. As somebody was mentioning, the road doesn't exist. Create your own road. Once you created the road, then you start going out there and telling people that, hey, you know what, there's a highway which I built, please go and drive around that path. So I think it works both ways, but very important is that be in touch with the customer. And as I mentioned, I'll go back to that. Once you reached a certain critical mass, and once you kind of tested waters and you piloted your concept and you started seeing traction coming in, people tend to get into this trap of being detached from reality. They tend to delegate, which is important, because you can't be present everywhere at the same time, you can't be doing everything at the same time. But it's very important to not lose grip over market realities and be in touch with your customer. And yes, marketing starts right from the ideation, and it's an ongoing process.
So
does it answer
yes,
the question? Yeah.
So most of us here in Raipur as entrepreneurs are early stage entrepreneurs. So many of us are in the pilot stage, we're just piloting the product. So do you think the market where we pilot holds a lot of significance, a lot of importance, like the place, the geography where we are marketing our product as a pilot? So does that hold a lot of relevance in any of the
markets, physical markets, geographies are very important, but and India is a very, very diverse market, right? So if you tested in, let's say, a tier 2 town or a tier B town or a state capital, doesn't mean all state capitals will be the same. So, I remember our days in retail in Viva, way back in the late 90s, when somebody from Europe came and somebody from the US also came, and they were talking about India being this huge sort of homogeneous market, etc. But it's not, right? I mean, if you go to Uttar Pradesh also, UP, Bihar, or for matter even this part of the country, the dialect will also change every 200 kilometers, right? So, to answer your question, yes, I mean, when you're testing a product or a concept, geography does matter, and how people react to a particular service or a product will differ, because cultural nuances would be different. But your core customer need or the problem that you're solving does not change, right? So if you were to test the concept, I think geography is not important, but if you were to sort of go beyond that, it's very important to kind of test it in multiple geographies and say what kind of cultural nuances are at play when people are adopting a product or a service.
So in the journey of an enterprise, especially in the initial stages, which phase would you recommend that an entrepreneur should start spending on marketing, building a brand, PR, or the other allied activities?
See, I think people tend to get into that trap that the moment I get funding, I will spend 60% of that money on marketing. I think it's very easy, but at the end of the day, no amount of capital is enough, right? You may get 100 crores for building a brand and marketing activities, but that's not enough. So technically, I think you need to be frugal. You need to be very frugal in how you spend your money. And first of all, I think it's very important to start getting business throughput. Start looking.
Most of us, sorry,
no, that's fine.
Most of us are bootstrap ventures here. Most of
Yeah.
us in Raipur,
Yeah.
like, I mean, very few must have even got close to funding. So most of us are bootstrap ventures. So in that case, what is that crucial stage?
So I think the best way to build your brand is yourself. I think as somebody was mentioning, be shameless, be enterprising, and be seen as an entrepreneur, right? If you're an entrepreneur, go out there, talk to as many people as you want, and as many people as you can. I still remember, speaking from our own experience, for certain brands, we had allocations of monies and budgets, but for certain other brands and certain other products, we didn't. The only thing that we did, we went out there, went and met people. So it's classical feet on street marketing, field marketing. Go out there, talk to people. And we've seen fantastic case studies where brands have become successes. Look at Nirma, for instance. They never spent on advertising for the first 30-35 years of their existence, but it became a huge phenomenon. The promoter, Karsanbhai, was actually on a bicycle, going out there and going and selling detergents and washing powder. And the classical models and the classical rules of the game do not ever change. So it's very easy to fall into the trap. The moment you get funding, you start spending on advertising as we know it. But I think it's very important to follow the classical model. Be frugal in your approach. Once you started getting traction, once you started getting in the numbers, then have a sort of a very systematic way of spending and do it in a phased sort of a manner. Because people tend to fall into this trap of spending a huge amount of money, doing a big splash. I still remember, I don't know, those of you who might recall, there was a brand called Home Trade. I don't know, some of you. Does anybody remember a brand called Home Trade? Yeah, so probably my generation does. This was late 90s. They hired, they had all possible celebrities endorsing the brand. So they had a Hrithik Roshan those days, they had a Sachin Tendulkar, they had a Shah Rukh Khan, and a whole lot of people. And market estimates were they spent close to about 100 crores over a period of 6 months talking about hometrade.com. But at the end of the day, there was no business throughput. The business flopped. I believe they pivoted later and they tried a different business model. But after having spent all that money, 100 odd crores, and having the best celebrities, when they did a dipstick and when they did a research, nobody knew what that business was. Nobody knew what they were actually selling, right? So I think it's very important to get back into basics, adopt the classical field marketing route, go and talk to customers, go and talk to prospects, and there are no shortcuts, right?
So the primary mode of communication initially, especially the market research mode, should be one-to-one communication with the potential users, or are there any other ways also through which entrepreneurs can get effective results?
See, it works both ways, right? I think today we live in a very collaborative and sort of a shared economy, right? So if you come across categories where there are adjacencies of purpose, so for instance, you're in category X and there's another brand or another startup in a category Y who could have similar audiences, you could look at a cross promotion, you could look at an affiliate program. And a lot of people are doing that. Bigger brands are doing that. So I don't see any reason why people in the whole so-called startup ecosystem can't do it, right? So I may be into a consumer product in let's say the food delivery business, and somebody else might be a startup related to, let's say, interiors. Ultimately, you're possibly talking to the same set of audiences. Can you do something together? So I think collaboration is very important, and a lot of people do that. Big brands do that. I don't see any reason why startups can't do that.
So collaboration is one key. That reminds me of one big example in Raipur recently. One of the entrepreneurs told me that I want to get some construction work done, and I'll be giving to another person within the community, another entrepreneur who is into the business of construction. So that reminds me of that example.
No, absolutely. In fact, the other example of collaboration I'll give you is, when you're starting up, it's very important to have the right partner ecosystem. So, in your quest to get the best talent from the industry, you tend to go to the bigger boys. Let's take a marketing example. You would want to create some sort of a marketing program. You want to go to a big advertising agency or a digital agency or a performance marketing agency. But possibly you're not a priority for them, and it may cost some disproportionate amount of money, resources, etc. upfront, which possibly may not be feasible. So why not go to someone who's a digital marketing agency who's also starting up and do something together and grow together? Because I think it's all about collective growth, right? It's all about, and I think we live in very exciting and very fortunate times that it's all about shared growth, it's all about collaboration. I mean, the very fact that people are sitting here, I'm sure there will be business models which could become competitions, potential competitors, but they can also become potential collaborators. I mean, if large telcos are doing it today by sharing the same network, why not the startup ecosystem? That's the best way to grow. Grow together, grow collectively.
This takes me to a strong insight about Chhattisgarh particularly. Recently I came to know that Geo-Fi devices, Chhattisgarh has purchased the largest number of Geo-Fi devices amongst all states in the country. This is a data point by a Reliance employee. So considering this, and the second insight, Chhattisgarh government, the state government plans to distribute around 55 lakh mobile phones, normal mobile phones, not smartphones, amongst all the rural poor in the next 2-3 years. So sir, how can the entrepreneurs here, probably the digital entrepreneurs or anyone who is into tech, can actually utilize that opportunity and make big use of it?
No, sir, I think digital is a huge enabler, right? I mean, for any business today, whether it's a conventional business, it's a large corporation, a startup, an entrepreneurial business, SMB, you can't live without digital, right? And I think, as I said, given the mobile penetration, smartphone adoption, and the internet backbone that is available, and the content that is being created around it, I think it's a great enabler for growth. But having said that, I think you can't ignore the whole offline world as well for any business. Right? So it has to be an omni-channel strategy without sounding very cliche, but fact of the matter is it has to be omni-channel, which is why probably an Amazon still goes and ties up with a shopper stock to give it more traction, right? So I think only digital or only offline is something, or only app, I don't want to name them, but everybody knows it. People have tried only apps, but we live in a world of constant uninstalls. You have to look at an omni-channel strategy, right? So I think what is important is a great idea, good product, and an omni-channel delivery and engagement model with your prospects and customers. Does that answer the question?
To some extent, yes. So continuing that, as the early stage entrepreneurs are mostly resource strapped, fund strapped, so how do they tackle this dilemma? Because anything offline, any marketing or branding offline becomes very difficult. So how can they actually, is there a particular mix that you would suggest the early stage entrepreneurs to use? Or because we are quite happy as early stage entrepreneurs to actually go ahead and do digital. We have that much of resources, we have that much of bandwidth. But when you talk about offline marketing, it becomes way too expensive.
See, when you say offline is not just about TV ads and it's not just about print ads, right? It's about, as I said, going out there, going below the line, and reaching out to your prospects and customers. Your classical old field marketing model. Nothing beats that. Nothing beats that. And the other is PR. PR today is something. So anyway, going back. So if you look at the whole media landscape today, you have owned media, paid media, and earned media. So I think you have to look at your allocations and whatever you're spending in that kind of a bracket. So initially, depending on what budgets you have, it could be more earned media. It could be more content led, right? So if I have a particular product, let's say an eye care product or whatever, I'm just giving an example, rather than trying to actually go out there and create advertising around it and trying to do a print ad or a radio ad, a television ad, create content, seed it, through media relations, go to the media. So that's earned media, earn and have some earned media around it. Then maybe you can, look at paid media. So you can go to the offline world. There are also a lot of, mediums available today which are innovative, and that's probably a separate track altogether. But happy to engage on that, one-on-one with people and kind of talking them through it. But there are a lot of platforms available where you can actually look at more sort of cost-effective paid media platforms. And then finally, it's your own media. How do you really create your own and leverage your own digital assets? Leverage your own network, leverage your own YouTube channel, so the organic platforms are very important. At times in a sort of a hurry and an enthusiasm to create and build a brand, I think people tend to think that, spending big marketing dollars or creating an ad film is very important. But fact of the matter is, if you create a nice film which talks about anything, any piece of content, and seed it through your own organic platform, I think that's a great way. I mean, I think charity begins at home, as you call it. So start building your own assets well. Start getting traction there. And through word of mouth, through PR, through talking to people, and then gradually build it up through earned media, and then eventually paid media, as and when it's feasible for you.
As a marketing guru or a brand guru like you, it's hard to find in Raipur. I would like to call on anyone from the audience if they have any queries.
So, sorry I interrupted, but there's nothing such as a guru. I think we're all students, and that's something that, in all humility, I always believe, and that's my submission to everyone, that learning never stops. It's an ongoing learning, so we are all learning and we are all students.
So I guess that humility is the...
I mean, the fact that I'm here today, I'm learning from each one of you, and it's an ongoing process.
For an early stage entrepreneur, when he has to shoulder many responsibilities at the same time, does going to these networking events and various other community events or events, what kind of value actually does hold for
immense value, because as I was mentioning, in my individual capacity, I've been quite active in the whole startup ecosystem as a part investor, co-creator, and advisor to a lot of startups. And I think all the startups that I've engaged with, and all the startups who I have seen who have kind of scaled up successfully, the founders themselves have been really relentless, completely engaging actively, proactively, being sort of, I don't want to use the word, again, shameless, and just going out there and talking, meeting people. There is no alternative, there are no shortcuts. So you can't sit in one pretty corner with a great product idea waiting to be discovered. It ain't gonna happen. I mean, I don't know how many of you actually saw the Manoj Bhargav film. Has anybody seen the Manoj Bhargav film? Okay, so Manoj Bhargav is this billionaire out of US. You should actually see a site called BIC2, numeric2.in. He's a billionaire who's giving back on 3 accounts. So creating safe drinking water, fertilizer, and electricity. So these 3 things, he's creating innovative products. Even for somebody like him, who's a billionaire out of the US, who's actually been in circulation for quite some time, he came out with these full-page ads about 2 days back, talking about these concepts. So you can't wait to be discovered. You have to go out there. So I'm just giving an example of paid media, but you have to go out there, talk to people, meet as many people, network. See, networking is at times people think that meeting people alone is the end all and be all of it. But fact of the matter is, you have to network. So there is the scientific, and that's a separate module altogether. When you go meet, how you exchange cards, and then follow up. So a lot of people, in fact, I met this gentleman who's from he's again in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. What he does is he actually takes notes behind visiting cards, business cards, and then he has a rigorous process of follow-ups. So let's say he goes to a conference like this, meets 100 people, collects about 80-90 cards, he comes back, creates an indexing system of prioritizing the business cards that he or she has collected, and then bases that as an action point for every card. And I was talking to this guy, and he said that, look, about 50 to 60% of business leads and business opportunities is through these networking platforms. So that's very important. When you come to these platforms, I think it's obviously very important to learn, know, understand what everybody else is saying, but more importantly, go and meet people. Just meet people, talk to people, and don't be judgmental, because I think all of us, including myself, when we go to platforms, we go, what am I going to do? This is not relevant for me. He runs a travel company. How is travel related to financial services? Just an example. The fact is, you never know where synergies might exist. Go out there, exchange cards, meet, and then be in touch, and synergies will eventually emerge.
I totally agree on these things, because that's the purpose. We are running a company here.
Correct.
But there is a school of thought which thinks that these events somehow deviate a person from the focus, especially during the initial stages. Especially when a person gets early recognition or early breakthroughs, he or she tends to get carried away with that recognition and loses focus on the core competence.
So are you saying that these platforms could be distractions?
There is a school of thought that believes that.
So again,
how do you balance?
Yeah, so there is no one answer to your question or apprehension. I think fundamentally people need to remember that they are coming to networking sessions because they have a business to run. So this is a means to an end, if that kind of answers it, right? The other is that, as I think Amit was mentioning, that you have two kinds of founders, right? One who's like the backroom boy, if I were to use the term, who's working on the product, who's a tech person. The other person's job is to go out there and network, and you complement each other. And I have personally seen a lot of sort of co-founder combinations who do this exceedingly well. There's one guy who's always there, always visible. And there's one person who's quietly working behind the scenes and getting the house in order and putting everything in order. So it's a deadly combination, but I think both are very important. So it's not one versus the other. Both are equally important, and to answer your question, this is something that you just cannot, sort of not do.
So any other particular insight that you think would be useful for this gathering or the people who have come here?
See, I think it's very important, and cliched as it may sound, I think anybody who wishes to be an entrepreneur, anybody who wants to do something of his or her own, I think it's very important to build the brand because you as a brand is something which is paramount as an asset to everything else, right? I mean, funding will come and go, ideas will come and go, you may start another venture or you may start multiple ventures, but the core is you. Invest in yourself, invest in learning, invest in meeting people, and have this hunger to grow, have this hunger to compete, learn new things. Because I think at times what people do is that, once you've started a venture, exited, so you look at serial entrepreneurs, right? They've created one business, then exited, then the second business, then the third. Why are they able to do that? Obviously, A, because they feel that, that insatiable appetite to grow is there, number one. Number two, the whole orientation to learning, doing new things is there. Three, they're able to, the fact that they've created a great network, they're able to actually create great portfolio companies by being associated with people. Ultimately, people are very important, because at times people get carried away with technology, people get carried away with business ideas, etc. People are very important. I mean, I might sound a little old-fashioned here, but that's a universal truth. Invest in people, and as somebody was mentioning, it's give and take, right? You can't have an orientation of just taking. You have to give and take a lot back, or give something to take something back.
So from here, I hope that a lot of us early stage entrepreneurs will take our ventures to the next level by using some knowledge and guidance related to marketing, branding, sales that we've got here on this platform, and take our enterprises and ventures to another different levels. And thank you so much, sir, for your presence here, for the guidance, and I hope that you will engage further on with us, with this community here going forward. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.